Lucas's heart raced as he approached Zakhar, the towering figure who seemed almost larger than life. Every step he took felt like a leap toward his own fate, but there was no turning back now. His pale face, framed by dark, tousled hair, was a stark contrast to the hardened men around him. He could feel their eyes burning into his back, and their whistles sent a shiver down his spine. He hated it, the way they leered at him, but he had a plan. One risky, dangerous plan that could either get him killed or give him the protection he needed. Zakhar was everything Lucas had feared. A beast of a man. A killer without remorse. His reputation echoing through the prison walls. His muscular frame rippled with raw power as he lifted the weights effortlessly, as though the iron had no weight at all. The scarred skin of his arms glistened with sweat, and the cold, golden gleam in his eyes was enough to freeze anyone in their tracks. But Lucas wasn't frozen. He had to do this. When Zakhar noticed him standing there, his lips curled into a predatory grin, and he exhaled a cloud of smoke, watching Lucas with keen interest. "Well, well," Zakhar drawled, his voice low and dangerous, the amusement in his eyes matching the cruel grin stretching across his face. "What do you want, doll?" Lucas swallowed the lump in his throat but held Zakhar's gaze. "I need your protection," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. He couldn't afford to show weakness now. Zakhar chuckled darkly, setting the barbell down with a thud. He stood, towering over Lucas like a shadow, his body rippling with muscle and menace. "Protection, huh? You think you can just walk up to me and ask for it?" Lucas nodded, taking a slow step closer, his confidence growing with each passing second. "I've seen the way they look at me," he continued, a hint of defiance in his voice. "I'm not going to make it in here without someone like you watching my back." The other inmates began to murmur, sensing something was about to happen. Some of them edged closer, their curiosity piqued. Zakhar's golden eyes flicked to them, and they instantly backed off, afraid of provoking the most feared man in the yard. Zakhar's gaze returned to Lucas, and for a moment, there was silence. The tension in the air thickened, and Lucas felt his breath catch in his chest. He was standing at the edge of a cliff, but there was no turning back. "You've got guts, I'll give you that," Zakhar said, his voice quieter now, almost contemplative. "Most people who come to me end up begging for their lives." Lucas didn't flinch. He had nothing to lose. "I'm not begging," he said firmly. "I'm asking for a deal." Zakhar's grin widened, but there was a glint of something unreadable in his eyes. "A deal?" he repeated, amused. "What makes you think I'm the kind of man who does deals?" "I'm not just anyone," Lucas replied, stepping even closer, his eyes never leaving Zakhar's. "I know what I'm worth, and you need me too." Zakhar's laughter rang out, loud and harsh, cutting through the tension like a blade. "You think you're worth something to me, huh? You're a pretty little thing, I'll give you that. But pretty doesn't last long in here, doll. Not without a protector. Not without someone like me." Lucas's chest tightened, but he refused to back down. He knew Zakhar's reputation, and he knew what it took to survive in a place like this. Fear was power, and Zakhar had it in spades. But Lucas was betting everything on his charm, his wit, and the glimmer of something more beneath the surface of his delicate exterior. "I don't need to be your slave," Lucas said, his voice steady, even if his heart was racing. "But if I have to be, I'll do whatever it takes to make sure you don't regret it." Zakhar tilted his head, studying him with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. "You're bold, I'll give you that. But boldness has a price here." He stepped closer, his body looming over Lucas like a storm cloud ready to break. His breath smelled of cigarettes and something darker, and Lucas felt the heat radiating from him. "And what price are you asking for?" Lucas whispered, almost afraid to hear the answer. Zakhar's grin faded into something more dangerous, and for a moment, Lucas thought he'd made a mistake. But then Zakhar leaned down, his lips almost brushing Lucas's ear as he whispered, "You'll find out soon enough, doll. You'll find out soon enough." The words hung in the air like a promise, a threat, and a temptation all rolled into one. Lucas didn't know if he'd made the right choice, but as Zakhar pulled away and gave him a look that could freeze fire, he realized that nothing in this place was ever simple. But if he was going to survive, he would do whatever it took to stay in Zakhar's favor. After all, when you were a small fish in a tank of sharks, sometimes the only way to keep from being eaten was to become the one who did the biting. Lucas had expected some kind of test, a price, a demand. Something cruel, something that would make him question if he'd made the right choice. Instead, Zakhar simply stared at him for a long moment, golden eyes sharp and unreadable. Then, with a lazy stretch, he turned to the watching crowd and made his decision known. "This one's mine." The words were simple, yet absolute. Silence fell over the yard, thick and suffocating. A declaration like that from Zakhar wasn't just a claim. It was law. Anyone who had entertained the idea of touching Lucas, of using him, of making him their plaything, was now out of luck. He was under Zakhar's protection, and that meant he was untouchable. The tension broke with a few muttered curses, some knowing smirks, and the lingering weight of disappointment from those who had been waiting for their chance. Lucas let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, but he knew this wasn't over. Being under Zakhar's protection wasn't just about safety. It came with expectations, consequences. Zakhar turned back to him, that same infuriatingly amused smirk on his lips. "Come on, doll, let's get you settled in." Zakhar's cell was bigger than Lucas had expected, not in actual size, but in presence. The walls were covered in crude markings, tally marks that stretched across the concrete like the remnants of some twisted calendar. The space smelled of cigarette smoke, steel, and something inherently Zakhar. Lucas stepped inside cautiously, aware that this place wasn't just a cell. It was the lion's den. And he had just walked into it willingly. Zakhar closed the door behind them with a heavy clang. The sound made Lucas's skin prickle. "You're smarter than you look," Zakhar mused, studying him like one might observe a stray cat that had wandered too close. Most people would have run the other way. Lucas leaned against the wall, folding his arms over his chest, trying to look more confident than he felt. "Running wouldn't have gotten me anywhere. You were my best option." Zakhar chuckled, low and deep, before stepping closer, closing the space between them. Lucas swallowed hard but refused to back away. "You say that like you had a choice," Zakhar murmured, voice dripping with amusement. Lucas met his gaze, forcing himself to hold it. "We always have choices." Zakhar's grin widened, sharp and dangerous. "Not in here, doll. Not anymore." The days that followed were an adjustment. Lucas was no longer just another fresh inmate. He was Zakhar's. That meant no one so much as breathed in his direction without thinking twice. It also meant that Zakhar had expectations. "You're under my protection," Zakhar said one evening, watching Lucas from his bunk. "That means you belong to me, and belonging to me comes with rules." Lucas sat on the opposite bunk, one leg tucked under the other, feigning nonchalance. "Rules, huh? Let me guess. Fetch your cigarettes, clean up your mess, act like a loyal little pet?" Zakhar barked out a laugh. "Cute, but no." He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, golden eyes gleaming in the dim light. "My only rule? If you stay by my side, you don't run, you don't lie, and you don't fucking betray me." Lucas's chest tightened. The weight of Zakhar's words was heavier than any chain. Zakhar reached forward, fingers ghosting under Lucas's chin, tilting his face up. "Think you can handle that, doll?" Lucas knew that whatever he answered, his fate was already sealed. He wasn't just some pretty face in a prison full of wolves anymore. He belonged to the most dangerous one of them all,